Now, I forgot to mention this in my last video. Not the Dancing Brodus Clay video, but the video where I talked about Overeem and Lesnar and all that mess. Jon Fitch did this interview with Ariel Helwani, and I'm just going to briefly touch on it before I actually get on to what I want to talk about. But Jon Fitch has done this interview with Ariel Helwani. He's doing a good job talking about a fight, talking about his career and coming back from the injuries and all of that. And then he started going on about how he's anti-pro wrestling. I was like, okay, let's hear why. And he's going on about how the UFC shouldn't be pro wrestling and all this stuff, and how pro wrestling lied to him when he was a child. It lied to him. God damn it! He didn't realize that pro wrestling was a work. That pro wrestling was fake. That pro wrestling is people playing personas and orchestrating and choreographing a show for the entertainment of the people that watch it. And he was flabbergasted, and he just couldn't believe it when he went to high school and put on a pair of wrestling boots for the first time, and there was a huge difference between what Hulk Hogan was doing and what they were doing in a high school gym. And I kind of laughed at it because it was like, to me, when I was a kid, I knew the difference between amateur wrestling and pro wrestling. I knew when I was about 7 or 8, to an extent, that this was a show that I was watching on TV, that people were hamming it up, and I did buy into it, but I knew that this was a show to an extent, and that amateur wrestling was a very different thing. Heaven forbid that someone tell Jon Fitch that Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't really play a robot coming back in time wanting to kill everyone. He'd be absolutely stunned. Even better, someone I want to see the day when someone tells Jon Fitch that Santa Claus isn't real, or that Phil Mitchell and Grant Mitchell were not really brothers. He'd be completely stunned. Anyways, with Lesnar going, everyone has been talking about, the UFC being hit hard in terms of star power, and the fact that, the big money draw, who's it going to be this year? Who's going to carry the company? With Lesnar out, Anderson Silva is not. He's a star within the UFC, but he's not the biggest draw. George St. Pierre is hurt right now. Nick Diaz is kind of on his way, and people are talking about who's gonna, be the crossover star for the UFC this year. And a lot of people are saying Jon Jones. Jon Jones is the next guy. And I was thinking about it, and if you can see by the title, there's one thing that is missing that is going to elevate Jon Jones into superstardom. And people will think, well, what do you mean by that? Surely he's met superstardom. He's been a light heavyweight champion. He's an exciting fighter. He does things in fights that you don't usually see. He's dynamic, very creative, very well spoken, likable to a lot of people, and to other people they kind of find him a bit arrogant. But he's got charisma. He's a likable enough person. And he's been on a tear this past couple of years, beating very, very accomplished and established talent within his weight class. And through all of those great things, and the K-Swiss ad and all of that stuff that he's been involved in, he still hasn't hit that level where the whole world knows who he is. And he's not far from it. He's not far from it at all. But if there's one thing that he is missing that is going to catapult him, it's not those that merchandise or the action figure or the relationship with some other celebrity and being a womanizer or any of those things or the bling. The one thing that I feel that Jon Jones is missing right now and needs, and it's going to be very stunning when I say this, is Rashad Evans. Now, let that digest for a few seconds and think about this. Tito Ortiz and Ken Shamrock. We all knew what was going to happen. We all knew Tito was going to win. But one of the reasons that we know who Tito Ortiz is now today is because of the rivalry he had with Ken Shamrock. And the fact that it was almost like a pro wrestling like grudge. That's right, Mr. Fitch. A pro wrestling like grudge that appealed to a wider audience. The first fight showed potential as to where the UFC could get to. The second fight really got people talking, and by the time they had their third fight, Ortiz was a bigger star than ever before. Then you have Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz, and Chuck was on the rise. And Chuck, when he had those two fights with Tito Ortiz and Couture, but I think more of the Tito fights, because of what it was and how it was sold to the audience, Chuck went from here to here. And that's the thing. Rivalries are very important in sports. What would Arsenal be without Tottenham? What would, and this is now pro wrestling, Bret Hart be without Shawn Michaels? What would have Hulk Hogan been without Roddy Piper and Randy Savage? What would, I could just go on and on and on about these rivalries. What would Muhammad Ali be without the Thriller in Manila and everything that happened there with the rivalries that he had? It's these rivalries, these almost heated and personal rivalries, that bring something out in someone and appeal to the audience and get your attention. Now, last year we were set to have seen Jon Jones and Rashad Evans. It didn't happen. There's so many elements that come with that fight that I feel could really bring Jon Jones up to another level. What you haven't realized is that Rashad is a great adversary for someone to fight against because he's a very good talker. If you've not seen his interviews, you'll know what I mean. He gives you enough banter where you can go back and forth, back and forth. Look at how he was with Phil Davis, although he did say that really dumb comment about Penn State, which was stupid. But the fact is, he's a good adversary and he's a very good person to sell a fight with. And given the story with Jon Jones and Rashad Evans, the fact that Rashad was the established guy in the Greg Jackson camp, was a UFC light heavyweight champion, worked his way into another shot for the belt, got injured. Jon Jones was this guy on the rise, this dynamic, young, creative fighter coming up, joins the Greg Jackson camp. The Greg Jackson camp very naive to think that these two won't fight each other or won't be put in that position to the very least. Rashad gets injured when he's supposed to fight Shogun. Jon Jones crushes Ryan Bader. Jon Jones is then given the title shot. Then everyone's talking, will they fight each other? Will they fight each other? They're in the same camp. No, we won't fight each other. We're friends. Then Jon comes out on Versus and says, oh, I'd fight Rashad Evans. That completely sets the whole thing off. Jon then wins the belt. And then this huge thing's just blown up. Rashad leaves the camp. It's this tremendous story that's better than anything that you can ever have wished for in pro wrestling or any kind of television show. It's a tremendous story. This, two friends now duking it out, and there was a fallout because of it, and, we don't know how much truth there is to some of it. There is some element of truth to it, I do know that, and there's some bad feeling that's been created from it, and it's to the point where it could be one of the most interesting fights of the year. And I feel that this is a fight that needs to happen, and it's a rivalry that needs to take place in order for Jon Jones to go from a star within the UFC to a crossover mainstream star that the whole world knows about. And will it happen? I hope it does, because it's a fight that needs to happen. It's a fight people want to see. It's one of the big fights that needs to happen in 2012, to be honest with you. They could, with the Fox deal right now, Fox being the biggest network that they could ever have wished to have been on, possibly doing the Ultimate Fighter on, or even a UFC primetime. If they have a series of fights, I believe that that's the thing that's going to hit Jon Jones up to superstardom. Anyways, I will stop right there. My mouth's getting dry. Let me know what you think about rivalries, and have you ever noticed that with people in sports, especially in combat sports? They are almost there, and then there's that one rivalry that brings them from here to way up. Anyways, let me know what you think, and I will hopefully do another video very soon.